Raise your hands if you have heard of a hedge fund. All right, how many of you could explain what a hedge fund does? You're not alone, and don't worry, for the point of this talk, you don't need to know. So it's not actually a small animal called a hedgehog with a coin, but it is actually a private financial firm that pools large sums of money from wealthy investors and institutional funds, like pension funds and government wealth funds, to invest in the stock market. And a combination of less regulation, lower taxes, higher fees, and enormous scale allows these firms with few employees to pocket vast profits. This puts these firms and the employees at these firms well within the top 1% of earners. So hedge fund managers earn on average $2.4 million US, and even entry-level analysts earn around $372,000, which is just approaching the threshold for the top 1% of US family earnings. Globally, the industry has 10,000 firms worldwide with only 390,000 employees. It manages $3.2 trillion in assets, which is roughly about the equivalent to half of the GDP of the entire European Union. Now, many of you all of you are all familiar with the fact that rising income inequality is an increasingly bad phenomenon. And you might be aware that these high earnings are concentrated in the financial sector. What is often less known is that very few members of the 1% are women, so 89% are men. And in the US, white families are roughly 3 times as likely to be in the top 10%. So the underrepresentation of women and racial and ethnic minority men among top earners led me to question previous accounts for rising income inequality in the US. The dominant account has been one of productivity. It says that new technologies have led workers to develop new skills, and this has increased their efficiency and productivity. However, some scholars have found that workers in financial services earn more than their high-earning counterparts in technology and other fields, information technology, and other fields with similar technological advancements. Rather, they point to the fact that the institutional context of finance explains the high earnings through the rents that this sector is able to exploit from the rest of the economy. And finally, research on financial services argues that within the industry, people justify the high rewards due to the high risks they take. Yet, women and minority men are not inherently different in their risk-taking. And so this explanation cannot explain why white men are overrepresented among top earners in finance. So this led me to my research question. Why is the 1% a bastion of white male power and privilege? And how do gender and racial and national inequality among the 1% help to explain the high incomes? So to answer these questions, I collected ethnographic data on the hedge fund industry as a case study of the top 1% of earners in finance. I had previously worked in the industry from 2007 to 2010, conducting kind of background research for a large hedge fund. I returned to study the industry from 2013 to 2017. And I interviewed 45 industry professionals and conducted field observations at 22 industry events and 12 workplaces, including going through the hiring process at some large hedge funds. So my findings. In cultural images of the rich, we usually see a solo man at a desk or hoarding his money. But in real life, economic elites do not act alone. The hedge fund industry offers unique access to status, money, and power, and these high stakes come with risks and uncertainty. The stock market is volatile, and the regulatory environment constantly changes. So in response to this uncertainty, hedge fund managers are highly motivated to protect their interests. And this should not come as a surprise. We expect the rich to protect their interests. What is perhaps unexpected is that they establish community to do this. So at hedge funds, there is a common narrative of being like a family, being anti-hierarchical, and having a shared ownership culture in which everyone reaps the rewards. We wouldn't necessarily expect greedy, individualistic people to do this. Yet, they engage in community building by creating firms based on trust and loyalty, a necessity in the face of risk and uncertainty. But the community they create is reserved for a select few. Status hierarchies, such as those based on gender, race, and social class status, influence who gains access to both the industry and positions of power within it. And to create this exclusive community, hedge fund managers establish what they call flat firms, or flatter organizations, which provide a key to explaining the high numbers of white men. So the people I interviewed commonly called their firms lean and flat because they have fewer layers of managers and less formal procedures. This allows the firm to be more flexible and adapt to swings in the stock market. It also allows hedge fund managers to hire fewer personnel and pay fewer salaries. So this created highly competitive work environments and afforded executives considerable discretionary power. And I found that uncertainty and ambiguity in these firms allowed bias to flourish, and because it allowed for implicit social hierarchies to form. So today I'll share just two features of these flatter organizations that create inequality. So the first is a highly specialized and interdependent division of labor. The second features accountability structures characterized by transparency, reciprocity, and openness. And this is evident in a typical hedge fund organization chart. So hedge funds are organized around the hedge fund manager, who oversees the day-to-day workings of the front and back office. The front office refers to investment and client and services teams, and the back office refers to support positions. So within the front office, men tend to be concentrated on the highly paid investment team, which is both higher pay and higher status, whereas women tend to be concentrated in client services as well as in administration. And even within investment teams, white women recounted gendered assignments, such as retail investments, even when they had other technical expertise. White men often began their careers as generalists. Meanwhile, racial and ethnic minorities often specialized in a geographic area specific to their perceived or actual racial, ethnic, or national identity. And these specializations typecasted their expertise as niche and afforded fewer opportunities to advance. Leadership positions favored employees with experience perceived as general, quote unquote, i.e. US and European focus, rather from the global south or other regions. This shaped how firms distributed pay, status, and authority, and led white men to more easily access leadership positions. So hedge funds offices tend to look like this, and this also corresponds to the accountability structures at a hedge fund. They're designed to remove physical barriers and foster transparency and open communication. So executives and their staff work alongside each other on a trading desk that look like this one. And they said that they organized it this way because they wanted employees to speak freely with them and openly challenge their ideas. Yet in a context with few worker protections and powerful executives, employees did not always feel comfortable doing so. And several accounted how they were penalized when they did. So for example, I first met Sasha, who's a black woman in her 30s, at a conference at this schwanky hotel in New York City. At the time, she described her firm as collegial and supportive. When we met later, she expressed frustration when she learned that her teammate earned 3 times her pay despite being less qualified. So she requested a raise commensurate with her training and experience. Her supervisor refused and told her that she should be grateful for the job. Sasha had always been conscious of her token status as a woman of color, but this moment was the first time in her career she felt, quote, put in her place. She said, "That was hurtful, and not so much because you're not getting what you want, but because the things she said to me really showed her true colors, her real feelings. I've always been the one black person, but I've never been so directly spoken to, put into your place, like know your role as I was at this moment." And afterwards, Human Resources contacted Sasha to talk about what transpired. And this surprised me because few mid-sized and small hedge funds have human resources at all. Usually they hire a corporate shrink, a psychologist, to mediate disputes. It turned out that Human Resources was actually the hedge fund manager, the top executive at her 20-person firm. He asked if she intended to press charges for racial discrimination. And she understood the meeting as solely an attempt to prevent legal action, rather than to protect her rights as a worker. So tensions escalated until she quit. Her case appeared the norm for handling discrimination and harassment, and many described how pressing charges was considered a career ender because it would tarnish your reputation. And I point this case out to you all because it captures how the solutions when tensions arise serve to reinforce the power of executives and strengthen their authority relative to workers. This power imbalance was further reflected in my interactions with Jay. I first met Jay, who's Hispanic, at an industry social hour at this location in the photo. And as we all mingled, he was surrounded by a younger group of men of color, and when we would mingle, he would stop to introduce them to important contacts. So later I asked him how he trained to work at a hedge fund. And he said, quote, "One thing I learned immediately is there's a very strong mentorship environment. It's very patrilineal. what I noticed is, for example, my boss came from this place, and he had been taught by this guy, and he had come from some other place. One generation teaches the next generation who teaches the next. There's a strong sense of loyalty, there's a strong sense of kinship and family. It really does feel like a family. So I realized that the group with him, around him, were his mentees. And when I asked, he said, yes, as you get older, wiser, more experienced, you seek somebody who reminds you of you, who has that same ambition, that same passion, that same drive, and you teach them all that you know. It's an organic process. It's very tough to explain from a data perspective. Quantitatively, how do you quantify that? You just see it. You kind of feel it. It's organic. At events, I observed as highly segregated networks according to gender and race. And as men of color, Jay and his mentees highlight the underlying structure of the industry because they counter the norm for white male-dominated networks, making whiteness and masculinity more visible. And Jay also revealed how patronage is an ingrained feature in the industry. So wealthy hedge fund managers may become patrons, passing along their wealth to carefully groomed proteges. They create lineages of investment firms with shared strategies. For example, this man is Julian Robertson of Tiger Management. He's seated in an empire of over 120 Tiger Cubs and Grand Cubs. They manage over 250 billion US dollars altogether, and they feature shared strategies, philosophies, and profits. Yet, very few of them have been convicted of insider trading. So, in a related article, I identify how these firms are indicative of patrimonialism, which refers to an organization of authority where the leader assumes power through networks based on trust, loyalty, and tradition. The leader hires and grooms people he or she trusts. Then the leader trains the protege in exchange for their loyalty. And finally, for a select few, the leader provides the seed money for the protege to start their own hedge fund. Gender, race, and social class status influence who gets access to these opportunities because status characteristics shape perceptions of trust and loyalty in the industry. As a result, social inequality is deeply ingrained into the actual social fabric of the industry. So to return to my research question, why is the 1% a bastion of white male power and privilege? In finance, I find that the high risks do not necessarily justify the high rewards. Rather, firms designed to weather risks restrict access to the rewards to a select few. And in conclusion, the very processes that construct social hierarchies also allow hedge fund managers to demand the high compensations driving current trends in income inequality in the US and worldwide. Facing an unpredictable stock market, a select group of elite men protect their interests by building flatter, patrimonial firms based on trust and loyalty. And the implicit social hierarchies facilitate and legitimize the exceedingly high pay and allow this select group of elite men to groom and transfer capital to one another. So this system of male privilege is not only self-sustaining, it accelerates over time as they further concentrate their power and resources. And I think that it's safe to say that this system not only characterizes elites on Wall Street, as many of the presentations so far at the conference have pointed to, it also likely extends to those at Apple, Exxon, United Healthcare, Harvard, and the Oval Office. Thank you so much for your time.